Hey guys, welcome back to Tech Guides Radio. In today's episode, we're going to talk about testing the HTTP client in Angular. So I'm looking at the documentation here. It says, as for any external dependency, you must mock the HTTP backend so your test can simulate interaction with a remote server. The @angular/comments/http/testing library provides tools to capture requests made by the application, make assertions about them, and mock the responses to emulate your backend's behavior. The testing library is designed for a pattern in which the app executes code and makes requests first. The test then expects that certain requests have or have not been made, performs assertions against those requests, and finally provides responses by flushing each expected request. At the end, the test can verify that the app made no unexpected requests. So today we're going to talk about the setup for testing, expecting and answering various requests, handling more than one request at once, as well as advanced matching and testing error handling with backend errors and network errors. We'll also be testing an interceptor. Let's begin. So the setup for testing for the usage of HTTP client is going to require configuring the test bed and including provide HTTP client function, as well as provide HTTP client testing function in your test setup. This configures HTTP client to use a test backend instead of the real network. It also provides HTTP testing controller, which you'll use to interact with the test backend, set expectations about which requests have been made, and flush responses to those requests. HTTP testing controller can be injected from testbed once configured. So it's very similar to other forms of Angular testing, right? You're going to utilize your testbed within HTTP client. Keep in mind that to provide the provide HTTP client before provide HTTP client testing functions as provide HTTP client testing function will overwrite parts of provide HTTP client function. Doing it the other way around can potentially break your tests. Guys, I know unit testing is tricky, but bear with me here. So we're going to run testbed.configure testing module. All right, and we're going to add our providers array in there, provide HTTP client function, provide HTTP client testing function, and then const HTTP testing equals testbed.inject HTTP testing controller. All right, now when you test, make requests, then they'll hit the testing backend instead of the normal one. That's the whole reason we're doing it this way. You can use HTTP testing to make assertions about those requests. All right, so when you want to test your backend, this is how you do it in Angular. Let's move on to expecting and answering requests. For example, you can write a test that expects a GET request to occur and provides a mock response. I'll skip, reading through the sample code here, but I'll include links so you guys can take a look. And all this can be found in the version 20 documentation for the new Angular at angular.dev if you want to take a look. As an alternative to asserting on rec.method, you could instead use an expanded form of expect1, also match the request method. So here they're doing a const rec equals http testing.expect1. Method is the get method, and the URL is /API/config. Here's a helpful hint. The expectation APIs match against the full URL of requests, including any query parameters. Keep that in mind. The last step, verifying that no requests remain outstanding, is common enough for you to move it into an after each step. And the code here verifies that none of the tests make an extra HTTP request. Very important. So testbed.inject HTTP testing controller.verify. Cool. Now let's talk about handling more than one request at once. How would you do that? If If you need to respond to duplicate requests in your tests, use the match API instead of expect one. It takes the same arguments but returns an array of matching requests. Once returned, these requests are removed from future matching and you're responsible for fleshing and verifying them. So const all get requests equals HTTP-testing.match. The method type is get, it's get request. And you do a for loop const rec of all get requests. Then you handle responding to each request. So that's sort of how you handle more than one request at once. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. If you have any questions, leave a comment or email me, and then we can set up a time to go over them. So I'm available for all sorts of questions relating to anything Angular. So feel free to reach out. Let's move on to advanced matching. All matching functions except a predicate function for custom matching logic. All right, so the expect none function asserts that no requests match the given criteria. All right, so HTTP testing.expect none, arrow function rec, arrow rec.method does not equal get. This asserts that no mutation requests have been issued. All right, so this is very advanced stuff, guys. I'd say you could ignore it from that for now, and if you need to implement this sort of logic, then take a look at the documentation for advanced matching. And then you're gonna probably also have to test error handling. You should test your app's responses with, for when HTTP requests fail, you want to test those responses with backend errors as well as network errors. To test the handling of backend errors when the server returns a non-successful status code, flush requests with an error response that emulates what your backend would return when a request fails. So const rec equals HTTP testing.expect1 /API/config rec.flush failed, right? That's the error message. Status code 500, status text, internal server error. This asserts that the application successfully handled the backend error. I'm going to always write these tests, guys, with your HTTP client. You might run into some network errors as well. Requests can also fail due to network errors, which surface as progress event errors. These can be delivered with the error method. Const rec equals HTTP testing.expect1 /API/config rec.error new progress event with an error message network error. This asserts that the application successfully handled the network error. All right, so that's how you would implement backend errors and network errors for error handling testing. Last but not least, we want to test an interceptor. You should test that your interceptors work under the desired circumstances. For example, an application may be required to add an authentication token generated by a service to each outgoing request. This behavior can be enforced with the use of an interceptor. Make sure to take a look at the sample code here, guys. The testbed configuration for this interceptor should rely on the with interceptors feature. So you have your providers here, auth service, provide HTTP client, provide HTTP client testing. The HTTP testing controller can retrieve the request instance, which can then be inspected to ensure that the request was modified. A similar interceptor could be implemented with class-based interceptors. In order to test it, the testbed configuration should instead be provide HTTP interceptors, use class auth interceptor, multi is set to true. And all that's going to go in your providers array along with the auth service. And yeah, guys, if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to email me and we can set up a time to go over these. But that's sort of an introduction to how you would test within the HTTP client in Angular. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in today, and I'll see you next time.